Hello everyone, this is Pedro from Pythalista with one more video. Today is gonna be a quick one to explain the difference in between what's a managed and an external table. I'll do that in Fabric, but that would probably work exactly the same in Databricks. So let's get started. So if you are studying for the DP700, there is this module here that says about creating the delta tables, and then you have the difference tutorial here with the different modalities that you can save your delta tables in a Lakehouse. So I have here a Fabric blank brand new Lakehouse that I created, uh, named managed external, and I have a notebook with all the codes. So the link, I'll put this notebook in my GitHub, and then I'll put the link down in the description of this video, and after you can run on your Fabric if you want to reproduce. I'm using CSV with some geographic data, so I'm gonna use this data just to populate the tables that I'm creating here. So let's load the data of this data in the data frame, and I'll print the schema. So it started in 11 seconds and run pretty quick. So first thing I'm gonna do, like from the data frame, I can use the data frame writer API in Spark. So I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna write a format delta and save as table, and that's the name, and then I'm just gonna put a suffix here. That's the df manage, and then we can compare amongst them. So let's create that first table. So that's done. So if I refresh my Lakehouse here, you see that I have that table here, but in order to see what's going on, I'm just gonna have another tab, Lakehouse, and then here's the table. Then there is data there. You can see how it looks, all the columns. Let me just expand a little bit here. But if I click here and put in properties, it says it's a managed table. And there's the location where all the files are for that table. So that's a managed using the data frame writer API. Okay, so I call it df managed. It's all the same table that I'm going to create. Now I'm going to create a table using the SQL statement, and I'm putting here like using delta to tell that that table is a delta table. So using the SQL statement that was created, it's an empty table, you see here. And then if I also check the property for that table, yeah, SQL managed is a managed table. You see that this one, if I see the files, there's no files because I haven't populated that. So let's populate that. So I'm just gonna select from the previous one, which has got data, and then insert that into the table. Yeah, it has got data now. So let's do one more managed, which is, I'm gonna use the, yeah, let's select from here. You see that there is data. Another option, if you wanted to use pure Python, there is the Delta Builder API. Oops, sorry, Builder API. So you have to import Delta table, and then you put create Spark. That's the engine that I'm using, and then the name of the table, and then the rest is very similar to the SQL, but you do that into a chain of the Delta table object. So let's create that one. So that's obviously going to be an empty table. Yeah, it's a delta table. You see that there is this triangle here, which means that the table is a delta table. So That's the API managed. So properties is also going to be managed. That will be like empty, I think. So but let's put some data there. So I'm gonna now use the writer API, and then I'm just gonna use the append mode and then save that in the table. So those were the three examples using as external modes. We create like managed table using the data frame writer API, the SQL statement, and also the Python Delta Builder API from Delta library. So now, if we wanted to do the same, but now we wanted to store this table in a path. So the only difference that you do using the data frame writer API, you just add the path argument and then tell what folder it's gonna be. So that one, I'm using the same data frame, okay? And that's done. So if we refresh here, so that's the external. So the table is here. The dot is there. It's loading preview, but if you put properties, it says now that the table is external. And then if you go here on the data files and refresh, you see that a folder was created. So, and then all the data for this table is on that folder. And I'm explicitly saying that there is a path. Let's now create another one using the SQL statement. And then for that, you do exactly the same, but at the end, you put location and the path that you're going to save the files. And I think those names doesn't need to be exactly the same. They can be different. So let's refresh. Yeah. Let's refresh the data as well. So that's the SQL external. I'm not going to do again the properties. And finally, I'm using the Delta table builder API. So you have to pass the argument of location and everything else is the same. So let's see for that one. For example, it's also external. And let's populate that. Don't need it, but just to make sure that every table has got the same data. So now let's say that I don't want for that table to be managed by my meta store for some reason. I probably I would not go this path, but for some reason, some people would like to do that. So instead of using, if you are using the data frame writer API, you can use this save instead of like save as table. So if I do that with the same data, that table was created. Let me just expand here. But our table was not created here in the meta store. So, which like you cannot visualize and use all the features. But if you wanted to read that the data of that table, you have to use the Spark Reader API and then use the .load and pass the path. In this case, is this one. And then you can read the table like in Spark. So here. So there is one last case, other two last case. Let's say if I wanted to save that data as a CSV format, and I'm using save as table. That is going to be a managed one because I'm saving on the meta store. So that's the CSV one you see here, but there will not be a delta type table. So let's check on the properties. Oops, sorry. Let me just refresh first. And the CSV one is going to be, can you see, non-delta managed. The last one, let's say that instead of using the files, let's use the tables path to see what happened if I put save as table. And I'm using a path. If that one's going to be external or if that's going to be managed because it's on the tables path. So it's going to work, but that's something that I would not recommend, because if I do a refresh here, the table is going to be here. No, not this one. The table is going to be here on the meta store, but there will be no folder for that table because I asked to save here. So which is like, it's a little bit weird. You cannot see here in the UI. So that's something that I would not recommend. So basically what I'm saying is that you either use a path on your data lake or ABFS path where you have permissions, or just use the files path on your Lakehouse. All right, so that's the big difference in between external and managed. So the difference is the managed table, once you drop the table, all the data and the meta store metadata is deleted if it's a managed table. However, if it's an external table, the metadata in the meta store is deleted. However, the data remains where you specify the location or the path. So let's drop all the tables now. So I think I have 8 tables if I'm not wrong here. I create a function to drop them all. So that one, it's all dropped. So they should be all gone. I'm just refresh here. Let's see if I forgot one, probably. So you see that even though I dropped that, if I refresh the data, so I think files I never refresh here. So the external tables, the data is still here. You see, the data is still here, so I can query those tables. For example, if I get the external DF, or the managed table, I can read that. So, sorry. If I read the table, which is points to the meta store, so that one is not going to work. However, if I read from the path, I can read that, and then potentially I can recover that data in my meta store if I want. So even though I've dropped the metadata, the old managed table, because when I use the Spark Read API and then I put .table, I'm just pointing to the meta store where my table is. But if I point to the path, that was not deleted, because when you drop an external table, it doesn't delete the path file. So now that's all that I wanted to say for today. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe, like the video. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, put in the comments below, and see you next time.